So we'll get started. I think you guys obviously saw the interaction with Eric and the work and the research that he's done. So as usual, I won't be asking much questions because I had the privilege of doing that with him. So I just want to open the floor to just get your guys' thoughts and specifically interactions with Eric based on what you guys have digested. So because the mic is here, it's literally fastest 10 first. Don't all rush all at once on this very infectious topic.
I think it what you guys discussed and there actually leads on nicely to the two questions that were asked
In the previous session.
in the previous. So I don't know if the ladies would maybe just want to restate their questions, and then we can pick the conversation up from there.
Thank you. I think my question still stands based on the fact that, hi, I'm Felicity. I think my question still stands to say, why is there such a broad dynamic or such a heaviness on men based on the fact that there's this word that is placed upon them to say that men are deadbeat dads? Whereas it's not just men that are deadbeat dads, it's moms that are deadbeats as well. Because I did a video about this to say that we can't just literally put the title of deadbeats on man. Like, what about the woman? What impact are you playing as a parent to influence your child to say, wait, Papa how is doing 1, 2, and 3. So when I tell you, Yahori, your dad is doing this, believe me, because only just to say, oh, your dad didn't take me out 2 months ago for my birthday. So now all of a sudden I need to influence a child and make the child believe, Yahori, your dad is an absent father based on a presumption that I thought would be a grand gesture to make me happy as your mother. So I asked the question earlier on before we got cut off to say, where are we as a society to say, Yahori, the title of deadbeats should not only be applied on men. What about women? Because it takes so much demeanor away from a man to say, a man is a provider, a man is this, a man is that. But what are you as a woman implying and applying on a man when you use the term of a deadbeat? So that was my question.
Sure. I think, first of all, we have to understand that manhood is very precarious. And this is something that I also referred to in the video, to say that there's almost like a sense in which once I've given birth, and this is not in any way to try and minimize the challenges that women face and the things that they go through. But there's almost like a sense in which once I have given birth as a woman, that for me is a major step into proving that I am woman enough. And so everything else that comes after that becomes something that can be manipulated to make men feel like you're not good enough. And as we all know, the whole concept of being a provider is still very much a major aspect of how men understand themselves as men. And so as a result, if you're not able to provide, and you'll see that in a lot of instances, if a man is able to provide, you'll see that how he is treated, even by the woman that they may not still be in a relationship with, is different. Versus if there are, issues around finances, then she comes out and she will make you feel like you're a deadbeat. And at the end of the day, it's the children who get affected because they get caught in between the fights between mom and dad. They don't know where to go. And so what you also see in the long run, and I think this is just drawing from the work that I do as a psychologist at the school. I work at an all-boys school, and so what you often see is that boys reach a certain age where they start wanting to be with their fathers. Despite what the mother might be telling them about their father, they would still want to say, look, as evil, as bad as this guy sounds, I still want to be with him. I still want to know I want to hear a version of what happened between you and him from him. And oftentimes what happens is when boys have, it's either moms would try to, by all means, to get their boys not to have contact with their dads, or in instances where boys would talk to their dads, they would then realize that a lot of what mom was saying is actually not true. And that also allows them to have some, I guess, perspective in terms of, oh, okay, maybe my mom was hurt. Maybe there were certain things that she didn't particularly like about my dad. That's why she said what she said. But again, it's that of time eventually allows boys to gain perspective. But in a lot of instances, if the boy doesn't get to hear the story from the dad's side, it just becomes a thing of you resent your dad, and it creates a lot of animosity between children and their parents. So, but again, at the center of it is this idea of, if you can't provide, I am allowed to make up stories to make you feel like you're not good enough, and I am justified because I have given birth to this child. It's your duty. I can contribute, but ultimately it's your duty as a man to provide. And if you can't do that, then you are a deadbeat dad. So, yeah.
Eric, so from your perspective, from the research that you did, because you did from the single fathers,
Yes.
what were your hypotheses that you went in with that you walked away with, like your mind was like, wow, it's not what I thought it was, or some key things that came out from the research for you that was like mind-blowing?
Well, I think for me, the fact that when you watch the news, there's almost like a sense in which fathers are incapable. Whether it's said explicitly or implicitly, there's a sense in which you can't manage. And as a result, so to be able to hear those positive stories for me was something that stood out for me, to say that, you know what, actually, there are men out there who are trying their best. There are men out there who are trying to be mom and dad at the same time, and they go through the same challenges, just as kind of similar challenges as moms do. And it's important that we amplify these positive stories, because oftentimes in the fight between wanting to be, I guess, the most victim, because there's this sense in which, if I can prove hard enough that I am victim, or I am much more of a victim than you, then I will win the battle. And what ends up happening is that back and forth and the fight kind of clouds the fact that, there are people out there who are doing their best. And it's so hard to hear them when there is so much else going on in terms of the different other competing narratives. And I think for me that was one of the many things that stood out for me.
Yeah, that was a very interesting talk. I really appreciate the fact that you gave a more exhausted definition of what it means to be a present father and the kind of implications that has for other studies moving forward. I thought that was very interesting. I'm really interested in masculinities. I found it like the point about expressing your fatherhood on a spectrum was something that really stood out to me. So I think I kind of wanted to pose this question to you and also to the men in the group. When it comes to understanding your expression and your embodiment of your gender, are you open-minded to kind of going outside of the heteronormative definitions that have been laid out for you. Because it's very interesting to me when people say that softness is something that's associated with femininity, when it's really just a human urge and it's a human need to be soft and to be nurturing and to be caregiving. I don't think that it's just a feminine thing. You know, it's something that we all need, and it's something that I believe we're all capable of giving. So I just wanted to kind of get a sense of like, how open-minded are you to expressing your gender and still feeling affirmed in your masculinity, but it not being the stereotypical expression of that?
Just to add on that, it's the flip side of that as well. How willing or open-minded are you to giving up that masculinity of, or the definition that goes with masculinity of providing, of that defines you? So as much as being soft and nurturing, right? You then identify with that, but also on the flip side, because like he defined, it's not just about the providing. Men can be there as fathers with the nurturing, the soft, or just being there and not necessarily having to financially provide. So on the flip side, how are men okay with being like, I'm just there, even if it means I'm taking my son, my daughter to the park? How does that affect you? You know, does the inverse of that, giving up that what defines you as a man is to being able to provide. What doesn't define you as a man is being soft and feminine and being able to change a nappy. Like, how those two things conflict.
Yo, this one. So, I think the mere fact that we believe, because I think there's certain basic understanding and foundation we need to start off from, that there are men, women, girls, boys. And we need to operate with certain assumptions that it's not just only the differences in the genitalia, that looking at history and everything else, there's certain consistencies of shared, I can say, behaviors or whatever it is that makes men and women who they are. And we need to appreciate those. And I see those as superpowers, right? And I think, depending whether you believe in God or you believe in evolution, whatever it is that you believe in, is that you need the diversity for life to exist and survive. So you need both the superpowers, right, of a man and a woman. Now, the thing about superpowers, when they are not nurtured and people understand how to use them and control them, it can be a problem on both ways, right? It just happens that for men, one of the superpowers is the strength and protection, and when it's abused, it shows up physically, right? It can show up in money and everything else, etc. So the challenge that we are facing is that the narrative I'm worried about is the over time, because you have to understand that for women, history as what's happening is that for women, there's a talk of more celebrating the femininity, celebrating that, but at the same time, which is rightfully so, giving women spaces that were not allowed to in the rooms. But however, what I'm worried about for men is that we are asked not to show up strong with our superpowers, right? We are asked, if you say, I'm a man, that is loaded. Because what people hear is that chauvinistic, abusive potentially, etc. So then we're starting to get into a position where our superpowers, today I was in one similar talk. Someone was like, but why don't you allow boys to play with dolls when they're little, etc. There was an uproar in the thing, because we need to teach them to be, to nurture, etc. And to your point, we do, right? But however, what has happened over time is that because the family fiber has broken up, many boys grow up not seeing a father and a mother, because nurturing is not one of those things that you teach. It's you see it by observation. Because they're not getting enough opportunities, many boys, to see a father, how they treat their mother, seeing a father using their superpowers in a way that is controlled, and the way to show nurture, because it's important that boys learn how to nurture from a man perspective, not nurture from a female perspective. Because the problem that we were raising in that giving boys to play with a doll, the issue with that is that there's no father figure in the home, because they'll see a father either holding their little cousin or seeing a father holding their own siblings, etc. If they're only surrounded by women and they're only seeing women taking care of a child, if you give them a doll, they're going to move into the position of their mother and start want to nurture from a mother's perspective versus learning to nurture from a father perspective. So net, what we need is that we need more present fathers, more involved fathers, so the little boys can see and observe in order for them to enhance the other superpowers, or rather also learn how to manage their superpowers that they have. Because at the heart of it, going to those underlying assumptions, what gives men pride is protection and providing, right? So it's like one of those things that's where they get their joy. That's where they get when they're able to protect and to provide. It's built in, it's in the nature. So asking that, can they let go of the providing piece? It's almost like asking the lion not to eat meat, right? But however, what we can do is that, how do we equip them not to die to self, because that superpower is raging in? How do we equip them with the tools to manage the situation when they're in, versus trying to suppress that thing? Give them the tools to say, okay, if you're in this situation, it does not therefore mean you're not a man. But you do have an edge. Because you have the edge, it doesn't mean, right? It's like almost a sexual thing. Just because you need to learn to control the sexual desires, you give people tools to manage the sexual desires, but you don't suppress the sexual desire and say the sexual desire is a problem. So men being able to provide is that thing, is what it's in there, but how do we equip them not to feel like they're not a man or whatever because they can't provide? Sorry, that was a long one.
Yes, it was.
Can
I'm going to assume in the room are sitting millennials or before that, right? And I'm going to come, and I hope I don't get cancelled for this, but I'm going to come from a new generational thinking. And I think that's where your question comes in as well. You said at a human level. So let's forget man's instinct and, oh, I need to provide, women's instinct, oh, I need to nurture. Let's think Gen Z, where they are completely destroying the norm or thinking of a man is this, a woman is that, right? From a human perspective, a human bears a seed, male, female, it doesn't matter the characters of this mix, right? Like, what then are the roles of these entities? I agree with you completely, but I feel like we are now stuck, we are still being stuck in whether it was something that was culturally over time indoctrinated in us that a woman's role is X and a man's role is X, right? Or it's something that it was there naturally. We don't know. We are here in the present, and times are changing. And conversations are happening where there is no man, women. There's them, there's there. There is women that are like, okay, I will be the provider, you will be the nurturer. Or a mixed, like a family that there's two men and they decide, as I'm man A and I will be the nurturer, you man B, you'll be the provider. So like, how do we have these discussions that you're having in those type of scenarios where it's not about a man in his physical sense and that he has a penis, and a woman in that she has a vagina, and now because you're a man and you have a vagina, your urge, your natural instinct is to nurture, and your natural instinct is to be a provider. What if this man was born, because he couldn't say it out loud, his natural instinct was, I want to be a cuddler to my kids. I want to show them love. Whereas this woman is like, I want to go to work, come back, as long as my kids have eaten, there's a warm roof. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like what? Yeah. And then I'm done. That was my last comment.
Wait. So, I think, and that's what I'm saying, that what we need to appreciate is that there's always been a shift and a change. The Gen Z is not a new phenomenon in terms of cultural evolution, right? It's been happening right through time. And I'm not discussing roles, right? It's a difference, right? Women have been providing for a long time, right? They've been actively involved in also bringing in. So just and I'm not talking about the exclusivity, right? So my point is not that the role, the providing is exclusively for men, and nurturing is exclusively for women. Not at all. Is that some, if we look at just norms, because we have to agree. That's what I was saying, that from the beginning is that we need to operate certain assumptions. And those assumptions are based from history and are based with history and research has been done. And we have to operate with what is data-wise and supported by data. That for most men, the thing of providing is such an important, we can't ignore that. We can't ignore that and for me, one thing that I'm worried about as well is that because we have a history of and society of suppressing people who identify differently, right? And instead of bring them in, now start to vilify what was there before, right? You're starting to vilify what someone says, I'm a man's man, right? Let's not vilify that, because historically we've been suppressing those who identify differently. Let's give them space, and for them to be who they are. Let's get to a space where everybody can be who they are and what they want to be and identify as, without feeling that if I say I'm a man, I'm a man's man, someone who doesn't identify with a man and being a man's man, they feel offended by me saying that I'm a man's man, right? Let's create a space that all of us can be. So on the point in terms of going back to the role piece, right, is that it doesn't mean women can't be providers, but it's just that it's skewed towards that it means so much for others, right? And that's where
Or expected so much from others
exactly,
on the
right?
website, yeah.
And that it's and hence the point of that combination of a man and a woman helping to move the society forward is leveraging those superpowers. Thank you. Hey, sorry.
No, man, I think you guys are all raising valid points. I think the one thing, the nuance that I wanted to add to what you were saying is I don't think it comes down to the fact that I'm a man and I've got certain characteristics, you're a woman, you've got certain characteristics. It's more to say that my version of soft is not going to be the same as your version of soft. And within society, we need to make space for that. Like we need to figure out and understand how to cultivate the soft and the nurturing in a context that leverages my strengths as a man, right? As a father of 3 girls, like I have to be soft. I can't not be soft with them. And as no. So I'm speaking now like for me personally, right? As amazing a job as I might do at being soft with them, at being nurturing with them, at making sure that they know whenever there's a situation, they can always come sit next to daddy and have a conversation. There are going to be certain moments, certain times, certain situations where you are going to be the default. And there's nothing that I as a man can do about that. And it would be the same whether it was daughters or it was sons. Right? Like there are certain things, and it's not about a role, dad is this, mom is that. It's just literally like there's. Yeah, like it's almost like a primal instinct, right? Like we've got certain primal instincts where they know that hey, this situation needs dad. And they'll come to me, and within 2 seconds, dad is going to know what to do, and it's going to be the right thing. Similarly, there's going to be certain situations where they're like, hey, this one doesn't need dad. Dad is going to react in the wrong way. Mom is the right person to talk to about this. Mom is the right person to engage. And I think what we need to figure out as society is like, how do we cultivate those things? How do we cultivate the soft and the nurturing in boys? How do we cultivate the strong and the providing in girls and everyone in between without necessarily wanting to take away certain characteristics, right? In order for me to be soft doesn't mean I can't be hard. Like I can be strong, I can be all of these things, but in the next moment, I can also still be gentle. I can be a soft place for my kids to come to. And I think it goes back to that point of like, how do you parent on that spectrum? Like, how do you learn to exist as a human, as a person on a spectrum where you're not like one note hard ass all the time? Understanding that in certain situations, yes, you need to like get everyone to toe the line, but in certain other situations, you need to have a somewhat different response and a different reaction. And I don't think it's necessarily a case of I need to give up certain parts of who I am. It's about learning how to become a more complete version of who I am.
Thanks for that question. I think he answered most of the things I wanted to share with you. But I think as a father of many children, I'm able to emotionally engage with my children, from a 4-year-old to an 18-year-old, 19-year-old. One is in varsity. Some I engage with them on their sports days, activities at school, time to walk to the park, everything. I engage. I'm able with. I think it's about growing up allows us to have that emotional intelligence to see what need your child wants at that time. So, at the same time, I'm as strict, but they, when I come home, they're so fond of me. They look for. It's like a party, like when I come home. Daddy's home, and mommy's also, they accelerate that joy to say, guess who's home? And then everybody would run and everything else. But even when it comes to punishment, if they don't do something and they say, we're going to tell daddy, they'll do it. Mommy would even call them to order, but they would say, okay, mommy, but not. But if they say daddy, so I'm just trying to affirm that I'm more friendlier to them than their own moms. But when it comes to being strict, they also know that, hey, that guy doesn't play. So I'm able to attend to their emotional needs, as well as firmness, as well as when they need to cry. At the same time, I could give the same person a hiding, and then we'll tell him, but daddy, that was hard. He'd come back to me again and say, but daddy. And these are my boys. And I don't know, maybe it's just me thinking, but boys, if you also not exert a bit of more firmness, they end up becoming too spoiled and then too rowdy, uncontrollable. So I don't know whether there's a study there or not, but what I'm noticing is that you have to have a bit of more firmness to a boy. It also helps them develop them character to say, I need to present myself. Because if you don't, then they want to cry for everything, then they want to do, like I say, that it's not something qualified for me to say because I don't know, but I'm observing from my own children. Yeah.
Sorry. It's me again.
It's me again.
So you touched on the topic of initiation with Utami, right? And I come from a family of 9 girls. So my dad has 3 girls with my mom, and the rest Gidi 1. So what literally resonated with me was the time my dad said to me that I should have been a boy. So my other name is Banele, but it's not a registered name. It's a household name. So he gave me that name thinking I would be a boy, right? And growing up, I ended up being a tomboy, and then I resonated with my feminine side, and this is who I am today. So what I wanted to ask is, you spoke about the fact that his initiation was being a father, right? Then you have that bit that says there's women who don't have kids and you've seen as a problem. I'm 32 this year and I don't have kids of my own. And to date, my mom and my dad still ask me, when do I think I would have a child? Because to them, that would resonate with me being a woman, right? So as we see right now and currently, there are a number of men and our peers that have somewhat 3, 4, 5 kids, and it's still condoned to be okay to say, "Hey, I'm at the peli." That term would be used when you guys are arguing, but the more kids a man has, he's seen as a man. But when do you draw the line to say that you've got enough kids, don't do it? Because that also comes back to say you are not financially stable. For the number of kids that you continue to produce and bring into earth, these kids are innocent. We have women that lash at men and give them all of these names and say, he made me pregnant, I was his first, he broke my virginity, and so forth and so forth. But then again, you go and you still bring another child that you're unable to maintain, support. Your family comes back to you and says to you, look, you've got 9 girls. This is the same as my dad. My dad has got 9 girls. He paid in Tlaulo for 3 of them. The rest of us don't go by my dad's surname. And we sit back and we look at daddy and we say, Kodwa baba, isandla sakho wasiqinisa. But then you want to be so hard on us and say, Yoguti, we must follow in your footsteps. But you didn't do right by us. But yet again, you had all these number of kids. So why don't these 3 do right by you? Because the rest of us, you didn't pay damages for. So when we sit, especially for me, because I'm a very, very deep thinker. I think about a lot of things. It doesn't matter who you are in my life and how you portray yourself. Especially when it comes to my dad. I don't really have a relationship with my dad. And I think about the scenario to say, my dad is 67 this year, right? He's got 3 kids that he's paid damages for. What about the 6? Who is going to do right by you, daddy? Because we can sit back and say, well, you've got all these number of kids, but yet again, you were seen as a man because you brought so many kids into this world. My dad himself comes from a family of 15, 7 and 8. You understand? So when you guys spoke about the topic to say Tami was initiated in being a father, when do you draw the line of initiation on men when they bring kids into this world? Because it's very difficult as an all-girl family. It's very difficult for me personally to say I don't have a brother. I consider all my brother-in-laws as my brother. To say abuteni hakinala situation eso le mushimane. What do I do? Because I don't have a relationship with my dad based on the fact that Papa was so adamant in saying he wants to bring kids into this world. To a point that he thought me being number 8, I would be a boy. And unfortunately, I was a girl. So was my dad's initiation me or the 9th one? Or do we still prolong it? Like, when do you know, as a man, this is enough? You've dominated, your masculinity is seen, stop. Because right now, I feel like, ibile kokasi, collocationing, we have people that are my age that have 5, 6, 7 kids. And I'm thinking, what are you doing with your life? Are you a man because you think you can produce kids? But what about yourself and your identity? You can't allow yourself to produce kids, but then again, you want to be seen as a man. Because that term of being a man is saying, I have X amount of kids. But what are you doing that's standing firm with you to say, you're a man? Are you providing for your kids? We're going to do that simple test that you started with, to say, we're doing this test to say, I'm a single parent, this is what I'm doing. But this person is not supporting the kids. So when do you draw the line to say, you're initiated as a man, hypothetically, because you've got a kid? These people still continue to have kids. You bring them into this world, you can't support them financially, you're not doing anything, you're not contributing mentally, even to this child's education. So when do we draw the line to say, guys, enough is enough?
I think you
So I'm happy that you're being vulnerable to us, you're speaking, and I think we should respect that. Point of correction.
Okay.
You didn't qualify to say some men who do this. You said men.
Okay.
I have many children. Culturally, I'm following also a polygamous journey. Being a responsible household, still managing my relationship with my kids, I make sure that they understand where we come from. Initiation is different. Some of us, culturally, I went to the mountains. Some, in the Caucasian world, some goes to Boy Scout. In some initiations, I think identification is when the click of responsibility came for the gentleman there. He said for him it was when he became a father, to say, I need to change my ways. He mentioned that I've done certain things wrong, and that woke me up. So unfortunately, we also do have family members who are uncles who have many more children with multiple women. You wish that you look up to him as your uncle, which is a good thing, but you wish that he had that responsibility gene that would allow him to bring his seeds together and guide them. So unfortunately, I hear what you're mentioning, and it's difficult to say sometimes when parents or adults say, you should do things like us, but if you really sit down and look at the mistakes that they've done, you'd say, but wait a minute, you see, but then you don't call out your elders, right? So you understand, you learn from their mistakes, and then like your parents would say, they should even ask you, do you want children? Before they say, when are you going to have children?
fair.
So we each have our own. And to the Gen Z, I'm a Gen X. Some of the things that they say, if you don't know history, history will repeat itself. Some of the Gen Zs don't want to look at what works. It's like people who write books, you who contribute to documentaries. If we don't want to learn about certain things, to understand what works, what doesn't work, we'll keep repeating the same mistakes.
Sorry, I think just to add to that, having children does not make you a man. Yeah. I think we need to get that out of the way. Having children does not make you a man. Being a father to those children is what makes you a man. And I think if you've got that thing of I am a father to my children, you will know when you get to, no, beyond this one, I can't
I can have
anymore.
another one, yeah.
That's number one. Number two is to the ladies. I'm sorry, but like at some point,
Ngathi ibhombi izovela.
it's,
Yena,
yo
hayi
guys,
ibhombi, yes.
if you can cancel me, it's fine.
Better-
Cancel me,
Esicela ama-seatbelt.
it's fine. Cancel me, guys. Like, please be mindful of who you are having children with.
I always say, I'm sorry, excuse me, I always say to ladies that have gone away or separated from relationships, ya hore, be greedy ka popelo ya hao, because ke ya hao. Be mindful of the people that you allow yourself to think you are ready to have kids with, because you have a certain time frame and a period to analyze a person's behavior and level of thought before you can allow this person to be a father or allow a woman to be a mother. If you've walked away from any relationship and you do not have a child with that person, be grateful. It's a blessing in disguise. As difficult as it may be, see it as a blessing in disguise. And I always tell people this, ya hore, eba greedy ka popelo ya hao, especially women, because we think ya hore, bringing a child into this world to men is a trap. This man, if I give him a child, he is mine. He will do anything for me. But yet again, what are you doing? You're depriving a man of living. Because you think, ya hore, you've given him a child, he belongs to you. No, that man has not lived his life thoroughly just because you've brought a kid into this. That is literally a trap. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. I don't know if Eric wants to comment on what I asked earlier.
Guys, if you're the first one, maybe about Jutile, but like 2, 3, 4 plus, no, guys, please respect yourselves.
I think I just want to add something around how contradictory masculinity can be, in a sense that, you know, oftentimes we like to think of masculinity as a coherent whole thing. It's not. There are so many contradictory behaviors and contradictory messages we get from society that you would, in one instance, have one aspect of that masculine identity highlighted. And because these are constantly competing, in the example that you gave, to say, well, why do you go around giving birth to so many kids? But what is the reward in that? There is actually a reward. As much as, you know, some people might look at you and say, you know, you are an irresponsible father. You walk into certain spaces, sexual power is a thing. And we cannot ignore the fact that boys, and I work in an all-boys school. There's a program that I put together with the grade 8s. It focuses on becoming man. And one of the aspects that I focus on is the power of the media in shaping how boys understand what it means to be man. And specifically when you look at, for example, hip-hop music and the messaging behind, yes, there is the lyrics part, but the video filming, you've got a lot of ideas around being a man, as you know, you need to have power, you need to be surrounded by women, you need to, there's nudity, there is, you know, guns, there is money involved, you know, exotic cars and all of these things. All these things almost kind of create certain fantasies around what it means to be a man. And so for some people in the area of sexuality, when you talk about being a man, as much as I might not be able to provide for all of them, but the fact that I have impregnated a woman, it gives me something to be proud of. Whether I am vilified for not being present or not, that's a completely different, you know, story. And that is where the contradiction comes in that, yes, I'm man enough if I can impregnate 20 women, but at the same time, I might also take pride in being a man enough by being there for those children. How I reconcile the contradictions is different. For some men, it might be a thing of, yes, I've given birth to the children, I have to be there. For other men, I'm man enough because I've just given birth. Whether I'm there for them, it doesn't matter. If you come and tell me that I'm an absent father, I'm justified in telling you, well, by the way, you. And so if I walk into a space where other men are struggling with their fertility, I might boast in saying that, you know what, we daughter. And this is not just a thing where men get rewarded from other men. It's also women in bed. What happens when you have sex with a man who's not strong enough? And the messages, the shame that comes with that. And it's all these, it's very nuanced and very complicated. And that's why, yeah, it really highlights that the fact that masculinity is contradictory, it's complex, it's got so many other psychological, emotional components to it that you would look at your dad, you're like, but you've got so many kids, how come? It's because of all those parts that I play in how he understands himself as a man. So I think, yeah.
I think one last thing. You both spoke about girl child versus boy child. So to date, I still feel like my dad's hand upon me is very stringent. Like, he's very firm with me compared to how he would be with all the others. I had a phone call from my dad about 2 weeks ago, and for somebody that doesn't have a relationship with my dad, he feels like he needs to share the very critical things with me. And I'm daughter number 8 compared to daughter number 1, who's still alive, where I feel like my father should be contacting the eldest before he contacts the youngest. So for me, based on the fact that he told me that I should have been a boy, but I came out a girl, his hand is very firm. So for somebody who's a female, and now because I grew up knowing Yahore, Papa wants so much from me as a female, I'm very dominant and I come off strong. I literally consider myself as an alpha female because of the way my dad was very hard upon me. What do you do when you find yourself as a girl child being forced to be tough in a tough world where you know, Yahore, there's somebody else out there that you can be so reluctant on to help you carry your burden, but because you're unable to do that, what do you end up doing? I'm a girl, literally. Like, how does my dad expect me to carry all of the burdens that he wants me to carry and tell all of my elder sisters and say, oh baba ut, oh baba ut, oh baba ut? It's going to come back upon me and say, why did he call you? Am I supposed to be the masculine female amongst all 9 kids that he has? He's got son-in-laws for crying in a bucket. My dad literally can pick up the phone and say, Mkwenyana, na yinto, call the rest of them. But why is it that for me personally, I feel like I'm just a little girl. I do not need to be tough in this tough world that we live in. I want to be an independent woman, but the independent woman wants to be soft, Lena. She wants to be looked after. So how do men, and I think this will go for all of you guys, how do you guys deal with women, the alpha females, that have that masculinity? Because I'm not taking anything away from you guys as men, but when you come across a woman who was literally forced to be masculine based on an upbringing, how do you take that down? Like, how do you turn it down a notch to say, Yahore, let me allow you to be a woman and drop all this masculinity? Because for me personally, I feel like it's a lot of weight on me. And I keep telling my sisters, Yahore, dad needs to find a way on addressing certain matters because I just can't.
I think I like that. Yeah. I think this is where your point comes in, to say that masculinity is contradictory. Because when, I think one of you gentlemen, please excuse me, I forgot, when you said there's an expectation for you to rise up as a man. When you find a female who believes that she's dominant, for her to submit, for her to move into her feminine stage, if you're not firm, she's going to think that you're not masculine. What if you now have children together? She takes a dominant part, you feel belittled, you walk away from each other, and then now there's an issue of the child being raised with two people who feel that my voice must be heard. So it comes back again to the point where it's not about roles, but it's about men also growing strong with how they were raised and believed to provide. But at the same time, you want to provide. But if, unfortunately, some women, if you earn more than him, then you start wanting to call the shots. You're forgetting that there's women who are CEOs, but when they come home, they're wives. But then some women still maintain that dominant part to say that I earn more, so therefore I say we're going to Cape Town, and he says we're going to Durban, but I earn more, so therefore we're going to where I say. So it's about you, again, to recognize. It's about you having guidance for people to talk to, maybe, so that sometimes you don't see your own side of the story. Because if he can't be heard, then it's going to fail the relationship. So where do you bounce ideas? Where do you have friends, people who you can also, or counseling? I think, I don't know where it matters or how it works, but somewhere along the line, you also need to find time to, like you said, you're a deep thinker. Have journal or something, read through your thoughts. Maybe they will help you to sort of see how he makes you feel. And ask the man also, how does this feel when I say 1, 2, 3? And allow him to talk. And maybe that time, it will give him the opportunity to express himself, and therefore you guys will find a way within the relationship.
You wanted to add?
Sure. Yeah. I think what you're talking to, and I stand to be corrected, is more personality, right? That probably your dad is sharing these things with you because he believes you can carry it. Or he believes that you have the personality to carry, because you have demonstrated something to him that he believes that you can go and talk to your siblings. And I look at masculinity like cars, right? All cars can move from point A to point B, but they've got personalities. You have sports cars, you have SUVs, you have trucks, and everything else. They do them differently, right? So that, and the certain, because cars move from point A to point B, and a lot of the masculinity most of the time shows up with confidence or whatever it is, then we confuse that personality because we're seeing all cars move from point A to point B, and then we start thinking actually they're all same cars, right? When actually all of them are different. Sports cars can fit 2 people, taxis, etc. And that's where the personality comes in. So therefore, in terms of personalities, you'll see both personality traits, both in men and women, coming across, etc. But underneath, there's that vroom vroom.
I think the only, to answer your point about how do men deal with alpha females and all of that kind of stuff, is I think there's a certain level of conversation about self-awareness. So the first question would be, in your interactions, then perhaps in friendships or romantic sense, whatever the case may be, for yourself personally, is your aspiration to always then be an alpha female? Or is your journey to say that I recognize this in myself, but what I'm actually wanting to pivot to is to leverage more of not always having to be the alpha, but then be the sigma? Because then, in that kind of conversation, if my journey is to be like, okay, well, alpha, I do more, then it's going to be the case, then what are we doing trying to fit a square into a circle, right? And that would be my only response in terms of how men, at least I'm speaking for myself, is to say, what's my journey, what have I come to identify about myself, and the role I want to play in partnership with somebody else. And then based on that, based on what you present, based on your own journey of being honest with yourself and being able to communicate that with me, then best case scenario, re tla bona ko pele, and we do the thing. Oh, it's been really great. Let's catch a movie sometime and just be friends.
I think I'm just gonna briefly comment on. I guess what you are explaining gives me a sense of you get a taste of what it feels to be a man. Because a lot of men, you almost like have this way you've been socialized into. And sometimes you don't want that. There are times when you're like, I just want to cry, but I'm a man. And there's so much societal pressure around not to cry. What do I do? And I think you're getting a taste of, oh yeah, so this is how men feel. Because a lot of us are socialized into certain ways of being. You are this and not that. Now what happens when I have to express myself in a way that contradicts the script? I feel like, and you would feel maybe dad would push. It's like, no, this is how I want you to behave. And we get that a lot, whether it is in public spaces and messages that are sent out. It's like, on one hand, we wrote a paper where we were just looking at, and I think I mentioned it in the video, if you watch up to the end, how the rate of suicide amongst men is highest. You have about 18 men committing suicide every day. And the difference is, women sometimes they have a lot of, it comes, I guess, easily for them to share and open up about certain things. Whereas men, there's a sense in which, no, you block it out. You have to sort it out yourself and you work it out. What happens when I can't? What happens when I want to shift from just being this stoic and, rock to being human? Because part of being human is expressing. And if I'm policed and I am punished for wanting to be human, what happens? I might get to a point where I have no one. And what do? I might end my life. And when men attempt, they don't attempt to attract attention. They do it so that it goes through. And you end up seeing more men committing suicide successfully than females who attempt. And so that is because sometimes, yes, it's good to be that alpha female, but sometimes you don't want that. And a lot of men, sometimes it's good to be that man, that hegemonic kind of version of a man, but sometimes it's not. What happens when it's not and I can't get out of that situation? I might end up resolving to alcohol. I might end up resolving to sex addiction or many other things to compensate for the struggles of not being able to express other aspects of me that society deems as not manly. So it's
From what I've seen a lot is that there's a tough one. Women don't know how to handle. They want men to be feminine, to be vulnerable. But when that happens, they don't know how to handle it. That's why that man starts feeling like I failed. Because now people detest you or people look at you as weak. And then this guy is full of shame. Then that's when they resort to the other way, to either move away or relocate, start something where people don't know you, or commit suicide.
Yeah. You had a comment, and then we're going to need to make sure people get home safely.
Okay, evening everyone. Slightly gonna change the topic, but not really gonna change it. I'm just gonna touch on the present and absent father. And now that you've brought up all of these suicide, vulnerability and all of that, and how is it linked to that? So my question is, you find at times when a woman tells the male species that she's pregnant, then the guy says, I don't want the baby. I will not take care of the baby. You can keep it if you want, but I'm not gonna be present. Now, first question, what's the impact of societal standards or expectations on the male, And secondly, I think wouldn't that be him expressing his fear rather, not maybe denying the baby, just being fearful of how to go about it now. And maybe slightly that would be him also being vulnerable, but now also the woman not knowing how to accept it, because I think most of the times that's when the woman says, oh, he's an asshole. Yeah, no, piece of shit, sorry. But then you get situations like that, and without understanding that, okay, maybe I should have guided him or reassured him that we will figure it out or something, So I just want to understand, Uguti, what does that really, how does it really impact the man in that kind of situation? Okay.
I wonder what is being honest.
Yeah, imagine.
Can I add to that question? I like adding to questions.
Hey. We must still get home nutrition.
So we have this notion that because it's the woman carrying the baby, that she has a choice, right? Pro-choice. Oh, you can go get rid of the baby. It's up to you. But to your point, what happens? This baby is made by two people. What happens where the man is like, it was fun making this activity was fun, but I am not ready in any capacity. I am not ready to be a father provisionally, whether I am there emotionally, whether I am how much choice. As the same way women, yes, we're carrying this child in our bodies, right? And we can walk to whatever facility that helps us to make this choice. But to her point, a man can be like, hey, bruh, it was fun last night, or whatever night, but I'm not ready for this commitment that we're getting into. A woman can go to a facility, it's done, but a man now, because you've decided that nake ready, whatever the relationship or the situationship or whatever agreement we have, what power, or does that even hold? Is that even a conversation that we're having where a man can say, I'm also not ready. It was fun, but I'm not ready.
Well, I think how I see it is on two fronts. Yes, on one hand, we can say, there are social and economical factors that, contribute to people feeling that I'm not ready. But I think we also need to understand that ultimately, when two, let's assume adults, get into a relationship, there is some form of understanding that if we are sexually involved, there might be a possibility of a child. I think whether it's from a male or a female perspective, there has to be that sense of responsibility, that sense of ownership, because we cannot always be excusing irresponsibility by referring to societal, constraints. As much as we know that those are there, ultimately, we've seen, people who can make it work. To say, well, if I'm not ready, I should have known that before, because it's not like, okay, all along we were having fun. It never crossed my mind that, this is a possibility. Now, when the baby comes, then I'm like, look, I'm not ready. I think that is irresponsible. There's a sense in which we need to hold people accountable as adults to say, look, if you made up your bed, sleep in it, right? And so I think on both sides, there needs to be that. And you can't excuse such behavior. But I think it's also that way. Sometimes people are not ready. And it's not just the finances thing. If it is, as adults, if we could consent to have fun and be with each other, we can sit down and say, okay, now that this is here, I wasn't ready, you were not ready. Can we make it work? Because now it's no longer just about you. It's no longer just about me. It's about another third person that's involved that never asked to be made in the first place, especially if we choose to say, look, we will keep this baby. What are we going to do? We'll have to.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's fair on the baby to now say, look, I'm not ready, I'm going to move away. It's just outright irresponsible, and we have to call it what it is.
I think.
Pardon?
What if roles are reversed? That the man says I'm ready, but the lady says no?
It is also irresponsible. I think on both sides, there is a sense in which let's come, because the baby is made as a result of two people. And in any case, that responsibility needs to be shared. However, that is, done.
I think there's just one point I want to make on this is the place where our society and culture is at when it comes to the crux of these issues. To your point about how does a guy react, I think the other reality is over the last decade or so, and correctly so, I think men have moved into a space where they have been told that they have no decision-making power as far as anything that's got to do with a woman's body. So you dare not have any, even if you're my husband, so therefore, even if he fully feels like he's not ready for this and he expresses it and all of that kind of stuff, right? The underlying thing is that ultimately it's my body, my choice. And whether you like it or not, because me, I want this child. And I have, therefore, in terms of the context of I think where a lot of the conversation has gone, right? The absolute fundamental right to be alpha female and be like, yeah, baba, therefore you're a deadbeat, you're in, because, do you know what I mean? So it becomes very difficult, because then the other side of the sword is, if he is honest and says, right, that he's not ready, then that vulnerability can be like, okay, well, I get you're weak, you're not in it, so I think that's the other lens we need to look at it.
I think it must just be said for the record, guys. Nothing prepares you for having a child. Like, there's nothing that's going to make you ready. Even if you've had a child before and you thought, it was fine, the second one's going to be a terrorist. There's no thing that prepares you. Right. Right. When it comes to the whole conversation about decision making around one's body, I don't think it's entirely fair or entirely right to be like, as a man, once the seed has been planted, like you had no agency in the making of you could have decided so many things before that seed was planted. You, as a man, you had every opportunity to make a decision before a child came to be conceived to make sure that that child wasn't conceived. So I don't think that perspective is fair, because then it puts all the onus, all the weight, all the responsibility now on only one half of the people involved in making that child. I agree with the point of view that, like, if you are engaging in sexual activity, you need to understand that there is a possibility, planned or unplanned, that there might result a child. And the responsible thing to do is, if you felt you weren't ready, like truly not ready, stop fucking around. Like, it's really that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can
Okay.
Enter it.
So I'm going to say something maybe a bit controversial. Because, Eric, you're talking about we need to keep each other accountable, right? And call out what's wrong and irresponsible. But we have a problem, because we are breaking down the systems of accountability with the liberalism growing. And yes, it's great and all, but we are rejecting and crushing cultures. We are rejecting and crushing religion, right? Which you check there, it's what sits in there, and here's the controversial one. Doesn't matter what religion, doesn't matter what culture you subscribe to or whatever it is. What's there, it talks about this whole thing about sex before marriage, right? Because when you haven't yet committed to be with this person, whoever the partner is, and committed to be with them for a long time and saying and doing that publicly with everybody and say, I'm committing to be with this person. When the child comes, it's putting a carriage in front of the horse. Because the child comes and you are not mentally ready, or you haven't made a commitment to be with the partner. That's why we end up in this situation. Hence, we end up having so many kids out of wedlock and everything else, because people had not yet made the commitment to the partner. And now they have to find themselves to make a commitment to the child with a person they never made a commitment to. Right? So that's what the problem is. Right? And then we need to take a check and say, are we going in the right direction of the liberalism agenda? Because the things about the liberalism agenda, the reason why it's so nice, because we can do whatever we want.
Vibes. Vibes.
Right? and that's human nature. Sleep with whoever I want, whenever I want, wherever I want, and nobody can hold me accountable. I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and nobody can hold me accountable. And that's what the problem is, and hence that's why we had the cultures, or we had religion, to keep us in check, that this do whatever you want has problems built in it. Right, so that's it.
Just wanted to add that it's similar to the vendor culture, whereby if you impregnate your girlfriend or whoever, you'll have to marry them. Oh, I have to repeat it to the mic.
No. Please return.
Oh yeah, so it's. I was just adding that point that it's literally the same thing, because then they're holding them accountable. Whereas some of them is just damages, but then sometimes the price of the damages is unreasonable.
Yeah.
Then now it's like, how? Kanti, is this a punishment or just right of way or something? You get my point?
Yeah.
But excuse you can close after this. But I also just feel social media has also played an influence in the way that society lately thinks. Because even if you think about it, it's like you guys were just saying now, you impregnate somebody and then you don't pay damages. Somebody will take you to social media. They will say, this is the father of my child. I will ruin you for every little penny that you have. Yeah. And it's not right, guys. I think there's a part of me that is just like very sympathetic with the way that people behave and the way that we need to go about in addressing certain behavior. You cannot put somebody on lash because they got you pregnant and they are telling you, I cannot pay the amount that your family is looking for. Let me come up with a financial plan to say, batswadi, can I let 50,000 ki? Ake hane ke sentse ngwana lona mara. Ke kopa le meeting halfway. You go and you put this person on blast. Guys, social media is the pits. It will ruin you for every little thing that you have because it undermines you as a person. It takes away your values, your respects, and your beliefs as a person and the character that you literally are. Because now, if I go and I put you on full blast where the world can see you, tomorrow, or tlakana le same are entwana kanti kwena motho ne ba bua ka yena ajo o sentse ke bona taba tsa hao kanti nna ha ke kokota maloba ke re e jo mpulele ke batla bupi kanti nona le lerato kanti lerato montse so. Do you understand how social media has so much effect on us? You can't even take an hour to yourself to say, let me think about my actions. Is the life that I'm living really who I am, and does it define my character? Because we are so influenced by Bo Kamon Pele and hashtag this is just an open discussion. I'm not body shaming or doing anything to anybody. Yeah. We have people that we look up to and say, I want to be like the next person. If so-and-so can do this, why can't I do it? It's not in your DNA to shame somebody and put them on blast. So because social media is there, why do you think you have the capacity and the ability to do that to the next person? It doesn't make you look like a better person just by doing that. So that's my closing.
Cool. I think what's very, very, very clear to me based on this evening is the overall topic of fatherhood is very broad and complex, particularly in the South African context. And in terms of why the session was held, it's meant to be the first part of what needs to be an ongoing conversation. I think what came off quite strongly in the first session is we need to have a sit down with Felicity where we can bring where we can bring her to speak to the certain insights and stuff based on her work, and have the right people in the conversation as relates to their lived experiences around the whole maintenance issue, right? Second point, based on our discussion, is I think on this piece of the different aspects of fatherhood, I think it's great for us to reflect as we have on where we are, but we also need to be intentional about what does the new age African father look like. We spoke earlier about this balance between, nurturing and hardness and all of that kind of stuff. Because ultimately, surprise, surprise, the prize is actually a functional, healthy black family. That's the prize, and that's why we need each other, and that's why we need to have these conversations. So, Danko, thank you to everyone for coming through. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.